about the cooks, about the cleaners, about the ground staff, and specifically about the nannies. Because Harry and Meghan do not closely care for their own children.
There is a story about Harry and Meghan that receives far less attention than it should. The executive departures are covered, the failed deals are covered, the public appearances, the legal threats, the PR battles, all of that gets reported. But when it comes to the domestic staff, the nannies, the housekeepers, the groundskeepers, the people who actually live and work inside the Sussex household every day, there is almost nothing. That silence matters because what happens inside that house reveals more about Harry and Meghan than almost anything else in public view.
The media has badly miscalculated the Sussex's professional turnover because we're not counting their domestic staff.
What has been happening inside that home says a great deal, and the public record on it goes back to 2019 when Archie was born. Even before the baby arrived, there were already reports of difficulties involving staff. Then came a detail that stood out even by Sussex household standards. Harry and Meghan went through 3 different nannies in just 6 weeks. 3 nannies in 6 weeks for a newborn in a household with more resources than most people could imagine. 3 nannies, 6 weeks.
Applicants for the nanny role must be willing to work 50 hours a week. What's interesting about that is that California labor laws state that the standard work week is actually 40 hours.
That detail was noted at the time and then mostly passed over, but it established a pattern, and that pattern has not changed. In the years since, the turnover among domestic staff in the Sussex household has been extraordinary. An insider who spoke to Los Angeles-based royal reporter Kinsey Schofield put it plainly. The media has badly miscalculated the Sussex professional turnover because it is not counting the domestic staff. The professional departures, the executives, the communications directors, the charity heads, those are the departures that get reported, but the number of people leaving the household itself is much higher.
Harry and Meghan have 2 main nannies and multiple others so that they have help at all times.
During one particular period, this person said it felt as if someone new had left every single week. Another former employee described her own experience in language that was strikingly severe. She told Schofield that the only word she could find for the way she was treated was dehumanizing. She also added a detail that keeps appearing across different accounts from different sources. Meghan's behavior changed at around the 6-week mark. For the first 6 weeks, everything was fine. The person who hired you seemed engaged, warm, and purposeful, someone you were glad to work for. Then at about 6 weeks, something shifted. The mask slipped, and the person you found yourself working for no longer seemed to be the person who had hired you. 6 weeks.
The family is looking for someone who is warm, professional, intuitive, and experienced, a team player who can collaborate easily with others in the home and navigate the needs of the family with confidence and care. The right candidate will have a genuine passion for childcare, something Meghan certainly doesn't.
That number appears again and again in separate accounts from separate sources. It does not look accidental. There is now a new nanny search underway. The Sussex household has put out what amounts to a job advertisement, and the details in that advertisement deserve close attention. They say a great deal about how Harry and Meghan see themselves, how they see the people who work for them, and what they believe they are offering.
This is nonsense. Meghan has a huge house with 9 bedrooms and 13 bathrooms, along with offices and ultimate nannies. There is no way she's leaving an important call for kids. It's because she was upset.
The advertisement describes the family as loving and dynamic. Dynamic is an interesting word to choose, the sort of word used to suggest energy and involvement without really committing to anything precise. The property is described as a beautiful home just minutes from the beach, surrounded by hiking trails with expansive outdoor space and a private playground. The household is said to be staffed by a long-standing, dedicated team that helps maintain a calm and nurturing home environment. That wording stands out. Long-standing and dedicated suggests stability, loyalty, and continuity. It sounds like the language of a household that has successfully kept good people for a long time. Those words sit uneasily beside the documented reality of sustained and unusually high staff turnover. The reason for the search is explained in the advertisement. The nanny who has been with them for 5 years has recently become a mother herself and is now being transitioned into a family assistant role. This nanny is notable because she is the one who agreed to appear in the Netflix documentary, the only member of domestic staff willing to speak on the record. 5 years inside the Sussex household is, by the standards of that household, a remarkable tenure. Now she is moving out of the childcare role and replacements are needed. The requirements listed in the advertisement are extensive. The successful candidate must be willing to work 50 hours per week. California labor law sets the standard working week at 40 hours, which means the additional 10 hours bring an overtime obligation at 1.5 times the regular rate.
So you think that if you've actually got all those people, they would make her feel happy and pretty. She's a little girl. Little girl likes to look lovely, and she just looks a terrible mess.
The advertisement does not make clear whether that overtime is actually being offered. The nanny will be responsible for morning and evening routines, school drop-offs and pickups, children's laundry, tidying the children's spaces, coordinating playdates and after-school activities, managing the children's social calendar, and helping with bath and bedtime. The person must be comfortable around dogs. A second language, French or Spanish, is preferred. Strong swimming ability is required. The nanny is also expected to support the children through developmental milestones, including swimming, biking, reading, and writing. Looking at that list, what becomes obvious is that this is not really a nanny role in the traditional sense. It is a comprehensive parenting role. The routines, the milestones, the emotional development, yea, the daily logistics of childhood, these are the very things most parents want to be present for themselves. They form the texture of raising children, and here they are being delegated almost in full to a paid employee. That leads to a moment that is especially revealing. Meghan's lawyer, in a recent statement to Variety magazine, explained why Meghan had left an important meeting by saying that she works from home as the mother of young children aged 4 and 6, and that sometimes children enter the workspace unexpectedly. The statement was clearly meant to humanize her, to present a relatable image of working parent chaos that anyone might sympathize with. A source familiar with the household responded to that explanation with open skepticism. The Sussex home has 9 bedrooms and more than a dozen bathrooms. There are offices. There are dedicated staff areas. There are, by the household's own advertisement, multiple nannies and a long-standing domestic team working across the property at all times. In a house that large, with that level of staffing, the idea that a child simply wandered unattended into an important business meeting is difficult to reconcile with what is known about how that household operates. The source was blunt: this is nonsense. Meghan has a huge house, dedicated offices, and multiple nannies on duty. There is no way she is leaving an important call because of the children. Another observation follows that same line. She does a certain kind of lovely smile, the sort of expression she might give to a friend, along with the laughter that goes with it. But nothing about it resembles actual mothering in any practical sense. What the image projected is always that of a wonderful mother, but the criticism is that there is nothing concrete happening behind it. There is something almost paradoxical in the image Meghan projects compared with the reality described by the household itself. The public version is the conscious parent, the mother who posts pictures of herself in the garden with her children and speaks emotionally about presence and connection. Alongside that sits a household that cannot retain nannies, that advertises a childcare role covering responsibilities most parents would never hand over completely, and that has a documented history of domestic staff departures described by former employees as dehumanizing. The explanation repeated across multiple sources is always the same. The first 6 weeks are fine, then something changes. Once it changes, it does not change back. Separately, a video posted by Meghan attracted a great deal of attention, though not for the reason it was likely meant to. The footage was presumably intended to communicate warmth and family life. What people noticed instead was that in the background her daughter Lily could be heard crying. At another moment, Lily could be seen sitting under a table. Children sit under tables for all sorts of reasons, and one video on its own proves nothing. But placed beside other recent photographs of Lily that had already drawn comment, images in which the child appeared somewhat unkempt in ways that seemed strange given the resources available, and set against the broader backdrop of everything else that has been documented about the Sussex household, the overall impression became difficult for many people to dismiss. That the gap between the image Harry and Meghan project and the reality that keeps surfacing around the edges of that image is not a new observation. But with each new report, that gap becomes more visible and harder to explain away. A household that cannot retain staff, a nanny search that reads more like a full-time parent job description, an explanation about a child wandering into a meeting that does not hold up under scrutiny, a video with crying in the background. None of those things alone amounts to a final verdict. Taken together, they form a pattern. The criticism does not stop with the nannies. The suggestion is that Harry and Meghan always place the blame elsewhere, on the nannies, on other staff, on imperfect employees, never on themselves. And the issue extends beyond childcare. It includes the entire domestic staff, who also seem to leave in unusually high numbers. The people around them are expected to be perfect as well. Questions are raised about the child not talking, or about why Lily still appears to be wearing a nappy. One view offered in response is that such concerns are fair enough because signs of that could be seen even in a moment when they were collecting melons. The focus then shifts in an entirely different direction, toward a Daily Mail column attacking Prince William and Catherine. The piece was written by Liz Jones and was prompted by an official portrait of William and Catherine taken at the Nigerian state dinner. By any fair reading, the photograph is composed and dignified. It shows two people representing their country at a formal diplomatic event, carrying out their roles with the seriousness such an occasion requires. Most viewers would see exactly that, the future King and Queen of England performing official duties with calm authority. Liz Jones looked at the same image and treated it as a cause for alarm. Her argument was that William and Catherine's public image, their relatability, their ordinary and open style, and their honesty about mental health, cancer, and parenthood all ring hollow because they continue to preside over a senior member of the family behaving badly. She called them ostriches. She described the portrait as a picture of Ken and Barbie. She demanded that they prove they are made of steel rather than plastic, that they come forward with what they knew and when they knew it about the Andrew situation, and that they stop hiding behind medals, jewels, and carefully staged portraits. The problem with that line of attack is basic. The decisions concerning Prince Andrew are not William's to make. Those decisions belong to King Charles because he is the sovereign, the head of the institution, and the only person with actual authority over titles, household arrangements, and access to royal events. William has, in fact, been pressing Charles on these questions consistently and with much more force than the public is aware of. One view offered plainly is that William and Catherine, and William in particular, have wanted to go much harder against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor for months. It was Charles who decided not to go that far. So the criticism is aimed at people who do not have the final power to act while ignoring the person who does. Without William's sustained pressure behind the scenes, less would have happened to Andrew than has happened already. Yet the column places responsibility on William for decisions that are not his to make and accuses him of inaction in an area where he has actually been one of the strongest voices pushing for firmer action. At the same time, the column avoids criticizing King Charles, even though he is the one with the real authority to make the demanded changes. That is not treated as an accident. The king is simply a less convenient target. The heir is easier. None of this feels surprising when placed in context. The head of communications at Buckingham Palace has a long professional history with the Daily Mail. He spent years there as a senior executive before moving into the palace press office. The relationship between that office and that newspaper is therefore unusually close, and over time a pattern has been visible in the output. Again and again, coverage appears that diminishes William and Catherine, blames them for matters outside their control, and presents them as passive or inadequate, even when the evidence points the other way. The Liz Jones column fits neatly into that pattern. What makes it especially striking is how detached its central premise is from reality. William is not hiding. He is not myopic. He is not doing nothing. He is the future king of a constitutional monarchy, working within the constraints that role imposes, pushing as hard as those constraints allow, and doing so at a moment when his father is dealing with serious health issues, his uncle has created an institutional scandal, and his brother is conducting a public campaign of criticism from California. Catherine, for her part, has conducted herself over the past year with grace and seriousness that is openly admired. Her return to public duties after her own health challenges was handled with such composure that the frantic speculation surrounding her absence now looks shabby by comparison. She has been present, purposeful, and consistently dignified. The portrait from the Nigerian state dinner shows exactly that. It shows two people doing a demanding job with skill and commitment. The formal dress, the composed expressions, the setting of official diplomacy, none of these signal distance from ordinary people. They signal professional command of a role that places extraordinary demands on those who occupy it. There is another detail that stands out as well. The Mail continues to refer to Catherine as Kate Middleton rather than Catherine, Princess of Wales. Kate Middleton is the name she has not used in more than a decade, the name of a commoner from Berkshire, not the future Queen of England. That choice is deliberate. Editors know her name. Columnists know her name. The older name is used because it serves a purpose. It keeps her fixed in the public mind as the person she used to be rather than the person she has become and will become. It is a small act of diminishment repeated steadily over years of coverage. In the context of everything else, the continual criticism, the habit of blaming her for things outside her control, the insistence on using the old name, it begins to look less like style and more like strategy. From there, attention moves to Princess Beatrice and her husband Edo, whose situation has drawn fresh comment this week. The background to their relationship matters here. Before Beatrice, Edo had been engaged to a woman named Dara Huang, with whom he has a son called Wolfie. They were engaged and living together, and then, quite suddenly, after Beatrice's heartbreak over the marriage of her former boyfriend, Edo entered the picture. He had been engaged to someone else. He had a little boy called Wolfie, and the transition happened with surprising speed. The previous engagement ended so quickly that it startled people around them. A man who can leave an engagement and a child behind that quickly is a man who has already shown what he is capable of doing when something he prefers appears. That history was not hidden when Beatrice married him. Concerns had already been noted within the royal family, unlike her sister Eugenie, who had known her husband Jack for 10 years before they married. Beatrice and Edo moved very fast. At first, things seemed to go well. Edo appeared to have a positive effect on Beatrice. Her confidence grew, her style improved, she seemed to step more fully into herself, and those changes were visible to anyone watching. But now, multiple sources are describing strain. Edo has been spending long periods in Florida, citing business commitments. His company has been developing well, and he has been building valuable investor relationships there. Back in England, however, his family has been living through a crisis. The Andrew and Epstein situation has produced relentless and damaging coverage. The pressure on Beatrice has been considerable, yet Edo has been thousands of miles away. More than that, and he has been posting actively on social media throughout his absence, sharing images of his life in Florida, his activities, and his daily routine there. This is not the behavior of a man who seems pulled home by an emergency. His own family in Italy are also said to be unhappy about the reputational cost of the York connection. They are reportedly concerned about protecting the business interests he has worked to build. The result, according to multiple sources, is the picture of a man visibly withdrawing from a marriage that is now costing him more than it gives him. The royal associations that made Beatrice valuable when they first met, the access, the social currency, the doors that could open, have all been complicated by the family's position. And Edo, who moved toward Beatrice quickly when the arrangement suited him, he now appears to be responding to the changed circumstances with similar efficiency. Beatrice, by contrast, is described as trying to hold everything together. By temperament, she is someone who believes in people and gives them more benefit of the doubt than the evidence sometimes deserves. That quality shaped her long relationship with her father. She believed in him long after the evidence pointed elsewhere, and she was devastated when the full reality could no longer be denied. Whether that same quality is now shaping the way she sees her marriage is something only she can answer. Her sister Eugenie, in visible contrast, appears to be moving through this period of family strain with much greater stability. Eugenie and Jack have been seen together regularly, and they appear close and grounded. The two sisters are facing the same family crisis, yet they seem to be standing in very different places in their personal lives. What ties all of these stories together is the same recurring thread, the gap between the image being projected and the reality that keeps appearing around its edges. In Montecito, it is a household that cannot keep staff and a nanny advertisement that reads like the description of a parent's full-time role. In the Daily Mail, it is a column blaming the future king and queen for decisions they do not have the power to make. In Oxfordshire, it is a princess trying to hold things together while her husband documents his absence from Florida. The carefully managed versions of these lives are polished and controlled. But the reality that emerges when people speak openly, when documents become public, and when footage catches unguarded moments is much less tidy. Those who are paying close attention have, by now, largely stopped being surprised by the distance between the two. There is more in the nanny situation that deserves attention, because the wording of the advertisement says almost as much as the role itself. The family says it is looking for someone who will become part of a trusted team and grow with the family for many years to come. That is the language of stability, long-term commitment, and continuity. It sounds like the sort of household that values keeping the same people around and building lasting trust. Yet the advertisement exists because that continuity has not been achieved. By credible accounts, this is only the latest in a long series of efforts to find and keep people willing to do this work. The desire for someone who will remain for years may be sincere, but it sits awkwardly beside the record of what has happened to people who have entered the Sussex household. A very specific pattern has been described by multiple sources. When Meghan wants something, she can be highly persuasive. The process of being hired into the Sussex household is said to be genuinely exciting. She is attentive, engaged, and able to create a sense of shared purpose and personal connection. Many of the people who accepted these roles apparently spoke positively about that initial stage. They believed in what they were joining. Then, at some point, with a consistency that appears across different jobs, different years, and even different countries, the experience changes. The attentiveness becomes demand. The engagement becomes scrutiny. But the shared purpose turns into something that feels more like service on terms that were never fully made clear at the beginning. The people who arrived full of enthusiasm find themselves counting down the time until they can leave. The 6-week mark keeps appearing in those accounts, and it does not seem incidental. There is a psychological idea sometimes described as the mask, the public persona most people maintain in social and professional settings, a more polished and controlled version of who they really are under pressure. Most people can sustain the effort of presenting their best self for several weeks in a new environment, but the effort is significant and it cannot continue forever. What begins to emerge after 6 weeks, once that effort becomes too difficult to maintain, is something much closer to the real person. Though for most employers, that process is ordinary enough. People have difficult days. They have sharper edges than their interview presentation suggested. That is normal. What makes this situation unusual is the consistency and the severity of what former employees say begins to show once that early period ends. The word dehumanizing is not mild language. It is not the word someone uses for a boss who is merely demanding or occasionally difficult. It suggests that something much deeper was affected, something tied to a person's basic sense of self. When that description is placed beside the advertisement's language about a warm, nurturing household supported by a long-standing, dedicated team, the words begin to sound different. Instead of describing what already exists, they begin to sound more like a description of what is being sought. So another part of this broader picture this week connects directly to how power operates inside the Sussex household, and more specifically to Harry's place within it. Earlier, there had already been discussion about the body language dynamic that Meghan's lawyers tried to deny in their statement to Variety. The touching, the redirection, the visible management of Harry in public settings that multiple analysts and commentators say they have noticed over years of footage. The legal denial did not erase what people believe the footage shows. If anything, it drew more attention to it. Added to that is the context of Harry's current state of mind, as described by people who are said to know the situation well. By those accounts, Harry is not a happy man. Then he is not a man who found the freedom and purpose he hoped for when he left the royal family. He is described instead as someone who gave up a great deal: his country, his family, his sense of belonging within an institution, and the military career that gave him genuine satisfaction. What he reached in California, according to this view, has not filled those gaps. Harry was shaped by very specific structures: the army, royal duty, a life built around hierarchy, contribution, and order. Those were not things he needed to escape. They were the things that gave his life shape. Once he left them behind, he did not find something better. He found a large house in a desirable climate, a schedule organized by his wife, and a public narrative that requires him to present his family of origin as the source of everything that went wrong. Do you know that narrative is becoming harder to sustain? The deals are not working, the publishing relationship is over, the speaking circuit is cooling, projects are stalling, the commercial success, the independence, the proof that they could make it entirely on their own terms, none of it is materializing at the level required. Harry, according to multiple accounts, is beginning to feel the full weight of that. The isolation, the distance from the people he grew up with, and the growing awareness that the life he chose is not actually the life he wanted are all said to be pressing in on him. What he will do with that awareness remains unclear. But the small visible moments of resistance, the hand not taken, the body turned away, suggest that something may be shifting. The household in Montecito is not the simple picture of a happy, liberated couple that was presented to the world in 2020. It is something more complicated, more fragile, and more revealing than that. The Nanny advertisement, with its aspirational language and its long list of parental responsibilities being outsourced to a paid employee, becomes one more narrow opening through which the reality behind the image can be seen. The situation involving Princess Beatrice and Edo has another side to it that receives less attention than the headline facts, but it matters. Beatrice has spent most of her adult life carrying a very particular burden. She is the daughter of Prince Andrew, and that is not a circumstance she chose or one she can escape. Everything she has done in public life has been done under the shadow of her father's choices and his reputation. By most accounts, she has handled that with considerably more grace than the situation deserved. When she married Edo, there was a real sense that she had found something good, someone who brought warmth, confidence, and style into her life. The transformation people noticed in her, the increased self-assurance, and the stronger public presence was considered genuine. It was not something manufactured for cameras. People who knew her said she seemed truly happy. That is part of what makes the current situation so painful to watch. Beatrice is facing what is described as the worst crisis her family has ever endured, and she appears to be facing much of it without the support of the man who married her. Her father is disgraced. Her family name is tied every day to a scandal involving child trafficking and powerful men. The pressure on her, as someone who carries that name and was close to her father, is enormous. Edo, meanwhile, is in Florida. The social media activity during that period stood out sharply to those following the story. Being away on business is one thing. Publicly documenting an enjoyable life in a warm climate while your wife is managing a family crisis at home is something else. Those posts were not merely evidence of absence. They were active records of where he was, what he was doing, and, by implication, where he was not. Whether that was simple thoughtlessness or something more deliberate is something only Edo could answer. What multiple sources now say is that the distance did not begin with the Epstein crisis. The marriage had reportedly not been in a good place for some time before that. The crisis did not create the strain, but it intensified what was already there. Beatrice, in a pattern that has shaped much of her response to painful truths throughout her life, is said to have been determined to keep going, to hold things together, and to force a path through by sheer commitment to making the marriage work. That can be seen as admirable, but it is also concerning, because it only works if both people are equally invested in the outcome. The suggestion here is that the available evidence does not show Edo sharing that same commitment. The contrast with Eugenie remains telling. Eugenie, who has long been seen as the more clear-eyed of the two sisters when it comes to the realities of their family situation, built her marriage on a foundation of genuine long-term knowledge. She and Jack knew each other for years before committing, yet their relationship had time to be tested before it became permanent. Now, as the family goes through its greatest pressure, that foundation appears visible. They seem close, present for one another, and steady. Beatrice married someone she had known for a much shorter time, in circumstances that moved with a speed and intensity that may not have allowed for the kind of honest assessment that naturally develops in a long relationship. She clearly saw what Edo brought into her life during the early period. the confidence, the style, the warmth. She may not have fully seen what he could become once the balance of advantage changed. None of this means the situation is settled. It may improve. Marriages go through difficult periods, and difficult periods do not always end in separation. But the pattern described by people close to the couple, the physical distance, the social media activity, the pressure from his family in Italy does not easily resolve into the picture of a marriage finding its footing again. It points towards something more troubling. Across all of these stories, two royal families and two sets of marriages and relationships are shown under pressure from different directions. What connects them is the same underlying question of what people do when the image they have built of themselves collides with the reality they are actually living. Some do the hard work of bringing image and reality closer together, making the changes that honesty demands. Others push harder on the image, increase the PR, send more legal letters, post more carefully managed content, and hope the gap never becomes too obvious. In all of these cases, that gap is becoming visible, and the people watching closely are no longer filling it with the benefit of the doubt.